Now, a little bit about the results from this year, because I think that'll give context to all the students and parents that are joining us today about just how competitive the road to Aggieland has become. Partially because the secret is out. It's become so darn popular, not just in the state of Texas, but increasingly across the country and internationally. Last year, A&M had the most undergraduate applications in their history. And as a group, we fully expect for that to be even higher this year. Okay, A&M is one of those schools that during the pandemic, as they went test optional, they saw an influx of students applying to A&M. Now, there are so many things that are distinctive about the admissions process at A&M. One of them is in contrast to what A&M would say is that little school down the road in Austin. And that is the auto admit process at A&M is radically different from UT Austin. It's top 10%, not top 6. And only 43% of their incoming class last year were in the top 10%. As a frame of reference, traditionally UT would say 75% of their incoming class is in the top 6%. Now, a large portion of the remainder, 41% of last year's class, were holistic, but you'll note we sort of use asterisks or air quotes to tell you that holistic is a little bit different at A&M. They tend to really focus on academics. Letters of recommendation are optional. And so it's a thing to understand. Lisa, do you want to talk a bit more at a high level about that holistic before a little later you go deeper into the components of holistic?
Well, maybe just to define holistic, that holistic means that a university is looking at all parts of your application. So they're looking at your academics, both your grades, but also the rigor. They're looking at your test scores if you send them. They're looking at your extracurricular activities. So they're taking you're looking at your essays, they're looking at your resume, they're taking everything into account. And when I kind of take it apart in a few minutes, I'll explain to you a little more about how A&M does that and maybe how that differs from some other schools.
Great, thanks. And then another distinctive of A&M is that they've really done a phenomenal job of articulating alternative pathways. Last year, 16% of the incoming freshman class at A&M came through what A&M refers to as alternative pathways. Students that are hoping to be Aggies are typically familiar with some of the options at Blinn Community College, where you're afforded an opportunity to pretty much be a full Ag, but then you have some GPA guidelines to hit. Gateway is a relatively new program where they basically say, come in the summer, have great grades, and if your grades are great, you can stay. These are wonderful programs for students to consider if unfortunately they aren't admitted in their initial application. And then the last thing is, one of the things that is unique about A&M is that they have spent the last decade executing on a plan to diversify their student base. 20% of their incoming class is first-generation students, and they are public in saying they'd like to get that to 25% as quickly as humanly possible. Now, there are a bunch of new majors at A&M each year. They've done a phenomenal job of really trying to respond to the student base by offering alternative majors and new majors. I won't read the slide to you. I will comment that we see a lot of students interested in psychology, either from the social sciences side or the neuroscience side. And for students who are interested in the neuroscience side, they actually offer 3 specific tracks in different colleges at A&M that allow you to pursue a degree in neuroscience. Lisa, do you want to talk a little bit about the review process?
Absolutely. welcome everybody. We're so glad to have you and thrilled that you're here to join us today. So I'll talk a little bit about the holistic review. So when we think about A&Ms, and I am going to compare it a little bit to UT because I think it'll be helpful for you to kind of understand a little bit of the differences. A&M is more focused on the numerical side of your profile. So for those of you who are younger students, this is a real push to get those good grades, take those rigorous courses. So they're going to be looking at both your grades and the rigor. In other words, did you take it that class AP? Did you know what level did you take the course, or IB if you have that option at your school? So really the big enchilada in the middle that I always say to students is you can't run from your grades. So grades are absolutely at the middle of this. Test scores, we have seen that A&M was genuinely test optional. We had quite a lot of students get in test optional last year. And so I think the decision, we'll talk a little later about, you know, if you want to send your test scores or not, but that is going to be a part of that academic read if you do share your test scores, right? And then in addition, you have the other parts of your application, which we think of in a holistic read. And I think where A&M is at with this kind of middle group of students that kind of are on the line, right? So they weren't in that top 10%. They used to have, just a couple of years back, the top 25%, and all of those were admitted if you had a certain test score. So if for students on the line, I think that the bottom part of this graph does come into play. Your resume, especially things that relate to the major that you're stating that you want to pursue. And then your essays, I think also do come into play. I don't think they come into play near as big as at UT, which is why some people say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I didn't get into A&M, but I got into UT. They're really evaluating in two different ways. So it is important to know that your major matters. So, you know, some majors are more competitive, and we'll talk about that. So choosing a major that you are well aligned to, that you actually have a background in, not just at A&M or at UT, but at all colleges, is going to really help you. And it's going to help you here too. And we'll talk a little bit because, you know, I think most students, when they think of majors, they think about business, engineering, computer science, nursing, and maybe communications, when there's so many options. And I had so much fun as we were making this presentation, like looking at all the cool majors. Like Bob said, 3 offerings for neuroscience. I mean, if you're interested in the environment, I lost count of how many environmental majors they had. So, you know, there's really a lot of depth here, but you're gonna wanna try to have some background in that. And then A&M is considering demonstrated interest. Claudia will talk about that a little bit later. Demonstrated interest is where you're showing the college that it's like showing them a little love, like that you actually are really genuinely interested in them, that you're not just wanting to attend, you know, you didn't just throw an application out, but you're actually genuinely interested. So when you put all of this together, this is how A&M is looking at the students. And so what they do is they take that top 10% and they get a yes real fast, okay? Because they're automatically admitted. Other students, what we notice is if you're like say in the 10% to 20% range, you often will hear pretty quickly too. But a significant number of students will sort of stay in what I would call purgatory for a while. And A&M even says that they go back and look a few times at those applicants. And one of the things they're looking at is interest for sure. So that's important to know. But the biggest place you can make an impact on getting a yes from A&M is in those grades. That's really like very, very important.
Lisa, one question that's come up quickly. Is there a difference in the relative importance of the personal statement essay at A&M versus the shorter supplements that A&M requires?
So A&M is going to be looking at the personal statement. And then what we don't know yet for this year, because they're making some changes, which Claudia is going to talk about, we're not positive what shorter questions they're going to have. We should know those any day. The rumor on the street is that they're going to do away with the diversity question and they're going to use the 2 shorter answers. Claudia, you want to add anything?
I do want to add, so like in the holistic review process, and just to share a little bit about my own background, prior to joining College Matchpoint, I spent a long time on the admission side of the house, reading and evaluating applications. So when it comes to holistic review, especially as you're looking at more competitive majors, so I saw that people are asking, how competitive is engineering? How competitive is business? The essays and the short answers become more important because it becomes telling in terms of what that student can contribute to the overall community. So the job of an admissions office, which is hard for, I think, most families to understand because you're so focused on your own individual student, is that the job of admissions is to build a community. So the essays can be very revealing in helping admissions understand what students are contributing to that specific community.
Fantastic. Thanks, Claudia. And someone's asked a question here, and I'm going to answer it right now. And Claudia, jump in if you want to add anything, or Bob, is what's the average GPA? I know that families get really excited about average GPAs, but the truth of the matter is that colleges do a lot of recalculating GPAs. So really what you're thinking of, I'm going to give it to you maybe a different way. You definitely should have more A's than B's if you're thinking that you're competitive for A&M, and you definitely need rigor in your coursework, okay? So if I was to ballpark it, I would say it's somewhere between 65 and 75% A's, somewhere in there. It's a strong pool of candidates at A&M. So that's a better way to look at it in terms of colleges, because they all recalculate the GPA kinds of things. So that's, and they vary so much from school to school. You want to add anything to that, Claudia?
Yeah, so when admissions is reviewing your application, it is in context of what is available to your high school. So you're not going to be disadvantaged if you're at a high school that, for instance, doesn't even offer APs or IB curriculums. So they want to make sure that you're pushing yourself within your homeschool environment. And so that's what they're going to be looking for. So if you're at a school that only offers a few APs, that you're pushing yourself up into those and really challenging yourself and having success in those classes. Okay, that's the other key part that sometimes people forget. But also that, like, if it's good to push yourself, but you don't want to be overmatched. Like, you don't want it to hurt you in terms of, like, you want to learn, but you don't want to, like, then get a C in that class, because that can show growth, but that could also not help your application. So colleges and universities, and especially A&M, are going to be looking closely at what your high school is offering and what you can do within that curriculum.
Thank you. All right. I think many of you know, and is, I think, one of the things that is always kind of concerning to people is that A&M is rolling admissions. So the application opens on August the 1st. Now, the key to A&M is early is better. However, sloppy is not better, okay? So you're not going to, it's very likely, it's looking like we're not going to know what the supplemental questions are until August 1st, I think is what we should all expect at this point. You want to spend time to do those well. You don't need a month to do that, but you're going to need a little time, depending on how many of them they give us. I'm guessing it's going to be 2. It's especially important for the business school because they have a very small population, okay? But overall, it is really good to get your A&M application in early, okay? So if I was to give you a date, I would say that you want to have your A&M application in August, probably a little more, not August 1st, because you're not going to send your best application and the applications are buggy at that point. Like they don't have all the kinks worked out of the applications. But I would say mid-August is probably what you should be shooting for, and that's going to help you. A&M does keep track of, you know, a lot of kids will wait till October, November. It does help you to go on and submit in August, but there is, I think, a little bit too much tension on August 1st, August 2nd, August 3rd. Almost no way you're going to have a really great application at that point. So just kind of weigh those two things together and aim to do your best application, to know that if you're A&M or bust, then you need to have some time set aside at the beginning of August so that you can get that best application in.
I would also add that it's great to get your application in. Having read so many applications in my career, you want a fresh reader. And I can tell you that at the beginning of the season, I'm way nicer, I'm friendlier, the world is wonderful, the sun is shining. And by the time I read number 1000, I need a new prescription to my glasses. I am not warm and fuzzy anymore. So those kinds of things also play a factor. And I think that sometimes families don't know that. So I'm here to tell you, early is better. Take the time.